religious freedom is a very, very important and sacred part of the Constitution. However, what is sticky is when a religion imposes hatred on other religions. And this is something that I think we really have to clarify. I do know Muslims, such as Judy Zasser, who live by Islamic law and by part of the Sharia, and they are wonderful human beings. And there has been an evolution within Christianity and within Judaism. I mean, we don't literally say an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth, but we've learned how to use legal acts and use the courts to mediate disputes. So I'd like to say it's very, very important to me, as being a member of a particular religious minority, that we don't want to have an assault on the religious freedoms of quiet Muslims who want to practice their religion quietly and who don't want to eat pork, who you know, want to dress in a certain way, and we have to respect that. But when they start wanting to legislate hatred towards others and fill their children's minds with hatred, that's where we have to draw the line. Thank you very much. Yes.
I just want to ask one question. If you feel that the local government officials are improperly carrying out their oaths of office, their responsibilities, there are higher authorities in Richmond. Isn't there a committee in Richmond that might be responsible?
Okay, the politicians in Richmond are not that different than the politicians in Washington. Governor McDonald, a lot of the people there have taken money from the Saudis. And I've made efforts to meet with them, to talk to them about it, and they're really not interested. And it's both parties. This isn't a political pitch here. And I agree with what Sarah said about there are Muslims that are not violent and things like that. And those aren't the ones I'm talking about. I mean, there are certainly some, but there's a campaign in Virginia. A man named David Ramadan ran. He got all the support of all the Republican politicians. He supports the Ground Zero Mosque, and he was associated with lobbying for Libya. Yet he says he's a conservative. I've never met a conservative like that. I'm sorry. And unfortunately, all the good people, like the guys who I thought were pretty reliable, like McDonnell and Cuccinelli and people like that, have all been among the missing. And I agree with you. You would hope that we'll even, you know, there'd be somebody here in Washington. But Attorney General Holder, you know, there's nobody. There really isn't. And it's pretty frightening. But we do need, and I'm not talking about anything violent or illegal, but we do need to fight. We need to start winning elections. We need to start running for office. We need to start paying attention and becoming active. It is no longer enough just to study Sharia and read the bad stuff in the Qurans. Now we've got to act on it. We need to act.
Okay. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Kyle Scheidler, who is our Senior Research Fellow at EMET. Kyle is a wonderful writer and thinker, and it's a pleasure to have him on our staff. Kyle is going to talk about the infiltration into American NGOs by the Saudis. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Let me make sure that our camera people are happy with their microphone, so hopefully we can leave it in one place for the duration of the speech. My name is Kyle Scheidler. I'm the Senior Research Fellow for the Endowment for Middle East Truth. I'd like to thank Sarah for the opportunity to speak with you today. In July of this year, 2 U.S. citizens were charged with acting on behalf of the Pakistani government, having received hundreds of thousands of dollars from Pakistani intelligence in order to organize the Kashmiri American Council, which lobbied on behalf of Kashmir's independence from India and contributed thousands in donations to legislators on both sides of the aisle. In June of last year, 10 Russian agents were arrested and eventually deported in a spy swap for attempting to, and I quote, search and develop ties in policy-making circles in the U.S. And I mention these cases for two reasons. One, because they both involve foreign intelligence agencies whose primary interest is not the acquisition of secrets, but instead the establishment of access to policymakers and the influencing of foreign policy of the United States government. And the second reason I mention them is that both the Pakistani and the Russian effort were really almost embarrassingly amateurish compared to the program of influence which was established by the Saudi kingdom and which is the subject of my talk today. In 2004, Saudi Arabia held a conference in Riyadh entitled "The Image of Saudi Arabia in the World," in which a group of Saudi officials and academics discussed what should be done regarding the, quote, countries tolerating or encouraging a hostile attitude towards the kingdom. And at this conference, the attendees made several proposals as to how Saudi Arabia could utilize their full national power in order to engage in influencing foreign publics and foreign governments. They specifically included a discussion as to how they should counter the perception that Saudi Arabia is involved in promoting terrorism and extremism abroad. The conference attendees discussed a number of proposed methods by which Saudi Arabia could engage in altering attitudes about it. One, utilize expatriates returning home from Saudi Arabia to generate a positive image of the kingdom. Use the Saudi private sector, such as Saudi Aramco, to publish pro-Saudi materials for foreign consumption. Use economic investments to put pressure on foreign government officials and oppose the, quote, pro-Israel lobby and its hostile media campaign. It's worth noting that the Saudi view of American policymaking is one which is beholden to pro-Israeli interests. If you look at a book like Mitchell Bard's The Arab Lobby, you see that the Saudis began lobbying against America's endorsement of the Israeli state really before there was an Israel in 1948. And their failure to achieve that goal and later policy moves where the U.S. aligned more closely with Israel beginning in 1967 have really shaped the Saudis' understanding of the information battle space. From their perspective, they are reacting. They are responding in a theater where the enemy, which is to say Israel or pro-Israeli sentiment, is already dominant. A final point I'd like to highlight about the 2004 conference was the premium place that they gave to expatriates, that is, foreigners who had resided in Saudi Arabia and returned to their home country. And this is significant because of the large numbers of U.S. Foreign Service officials, particularly at the ambassadorial level, who later go on to become involved in think tanks and policy centers in Washington, which receive funds from the Saudi government. I would like to argue today that the discussion at the 2004 conference represents an accurate reflection of what Saudi Arabia's strategic goals and methods are for influence operations in the United States. So if you'd like to keep those four elements in mind that I mentioned, I'm going to go through a series of case studies looking at NGOs and nonprofit organizations which have received Saudi funding and ask the question, do their activities meet the Saudi objectives proposed in the 2004 conference? My first case study is the Middle East Policy Council. It was headed by former Ambassador Charles Freeman, received $1 million from King Abdullah in 2005 and $1 million from Prince Alwaleed bin Talal in 2007. The Saudis had also promised MPEC an annual contribution over 5 years beginning back in the mid-90s. It was originally founded in 1981 by former Democratic presidential hopeful George McGovern and former Foreign Service officer Richard Curtis. MPEC has a long and storied history of going outside the United States for financial assistance. In 1993, the Times of Oman reported that McGovern met with its Sultanate's information minister to discuss cooperation. In 1998, MPEC's president Charles Freeman told the Riyadh Daily that he was in the kingdom to, and I quote, drum up financial support for the council. MPEC has pursued a large donation from Saudi Prince bin Talal since at least 2005, according to the Jewish Telegraphic Agency's interview with their executive director, who was quoted saying they had been cultivating a relationship with the prince for a long time and that their, quote, hope and expectation is millions. Later on, when Charles Freeman became embroiled in controversy after he was selected to serve as President Obama's National Intelligence Council chairman, MPEC attempted to downplay the role of Saudi funds, claiming that the Saudis contributed less than 1/12 of a $600,000 budget. So what do the Saudis get for their money? Well, according to Ambassador Freeman, MPEC basically does three things. One, they conduct policy seminars on the Hill in order to influence policymakers, and they've featured a number of very questionable experts during that time, including, amongst others, Abdurrahman al-Amodi, the Muslim Brotherhood operative now in prison on terror charges, as well as Ali Abu Nima, who runs a website called the Electronic Intifada. They publish a journal on Mideast policy, which has, amongst other things, blamed Israel for starting the most recent Iraq war, as well as equated Israeli military action with the military action of the Nazis. And their most important aspect of what they do is the conducting of training programs for teachers about Islam and Arab culture. MPEC is the primary publisher of the Arab World Studies Notebook. Notebook contained, at one time or another, various claims, including that Muslims discovered America before Columbus, that the Jews have no real connection with Israel or Jerusalem, and that there is undue Jewish influence in American policy making.